Repairing a relationship takes more than just talking. It takes listening and listening the right way. Today, we're tackling step 3 in the repair process, how to truly hear your partner, respond with care, and move forward with harmony. If you've struggled with defensiveness or shutting down, maybe in the past, this episode is for you. Up next on Master Your Marriage. Welcome back to part 3 of the repair process, which is listening. Repair, as we've explained, is a crucial skill in healthy relationships. The reason why is because every relationship goes through this natural cycle of harmony, disharmony, and then repair.
Yeah, all relationships,
Yeah,
right?
everyone, right?
Whether it's with our spouse, our partner, our children, our friends, all relationships go through these little ruptures where disconnection and disharmony happen. That's unavoidable. So if we don't want to get stuck in those ruptures where we can accrue years of resentment and bitterness, then we have to learn how to repair, and we have to learn how to repair early and often.
There are 3 steps to repair. The first step is having the willingness to repair. We talked about that, like 3 episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
The second step is speaking. And the third step is listening. We talked about speaking last week, but I think it's worth sort of revisiting the speaker's responsibility just for a minute so we have some context before we move into listening.
I agree. So the person who is upset, okay, so upset means there's been a rupture.
Yeah, the person who has this something they want to bring to their partner.
And we're already in disharmony, right?
Yeah.
So this person who is upset has a concern that they want to bring up with the other person, which makes him or her the speaker because they're the one who's bringing up the issue. Last week, we introduced something called the feedback wheel, which is such a great, powerful tool for the speaker because it allows you to be able to express yourself and whatever your grievance is very succinctly, clearly, without stepping into blame or accusations, which is absolutely critical that we avoid accusations and blame for a couple of critical reasons. The first reason is that how you start a conversation not only predicts how that conversation will go, but it can actually predict the longevity of the relationship.
So coming in hot is definitely a not.
Definitely a not, right?
I just had to rhyme that somehow.
Good job.
Yeah.
Well, let me put that another way.
Okay.
So if you start a conversation harshly, it will almost always end harshly. And research shows that a harsh start is actually a huge predictor for whether a relationship is going to survive long term or not. So as the speaker, your role in the repair process is so important.
Yeah. I mean, think about the last time you came in hot to a conversation. Did it ever
go right?
No. Did the temperature ever come down?
Not that day, maybe 2 weeks later.
Yeah. So the temperature never comes down.
Yeah.
All right. Reason number 2, we should use the feedback wheel. So when you're trying to get your needs met, the worst way to do that is through blame, through insults, through criticism, because, that just doesn't work.
Never.
So human nature is such that we want to help meet each other's needs unless we're starting to feel manipulated or cornered or pushed into it. Right. When that happens, it's really, really hard for me to want to help somebody or for you to want to help anybody that when they've sort of coerced you into it.
So if the speaker wants to create some solutions and get their needs met, it's a good idea to use the feedback wheel.
Yeah, the feedback wheel is great. And I hope that each of you managed to get that download last week.
Yes, we've got it printed out sitting here next to us. We might use that today.
Yeah.
So here's the bottom line. There is no such thing as constructive criticism in a marriage. All criticism is actually destructive. In fact, research shows that harsh criticism actually can impact your immune system and make you sick as well.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel good just starting there, right?
Yes. So how you speak, how you bring up issues really matters. Complaints, totally okay. We can have complaints. We can bring up issues. Feedback, again, totally okay.
Right.
But you have to be able to do it the right way. And that's why we provided you with the feedback wheel last week.
Yeah. And we're going to even work with the feedback wheel again today.
More today.
Yeah. So let's dive into the third step of this repair process that we mentioned at the top of the show, which is listening.
Listening.
Right. The listener has a very important, probably an equally important role in this repair process. And honestly, I think it's the hardest role.
I agree. I think listening is much harder than speaking.
Yeah. And that's what today's episode's all about, which is learning how to be a better listener in the repair process.
Yes.
Right. Listening, when done right, isn't about hearing words. It's about really attempting and truly understand what's being said, and then responding in a way that builds trust and gets you back into this harmony, into sync. Because not done correctly, it'll push you farther away. And that's not the goal of repair.
No, it's to get back into harmony. So let's just put this into some context. Let's say your partner, just imagine, comes to you and they're bringing a concern.
Okay.
Complaint, feedback, whatever we want to call it, right? And so they've grabbed the feedback wheel and printed it out, and they've done their best to deliver their concern in a way that's clear, concise, respectful. And they've hopefully done that in 8 sentences or less, not an hour and a half, right?
Yeah. Hopefully it's been concise. Yeah.
So now it's your turn. If you are on the receiving end of that, it's your turn. And your responsibility to be a good listener. Now there's 3 really important rules for being an effective listener. And I think we should go through these rules.
Yeah.
Okay. Rule number 1 is, as the listener, you have the primary responsibility of inviting and helping your partner move back into harmony. Wait, why is it my responsibility as the listener?
They're the ones with the problem.
I know a lot of you out there aren't going to like hearing that, right? But here's the deal. If your partner is bringing up an issue, they are the one who is upset. They are the one with the issue. That makes them the speaker. That makes you the listener. And right now, you're in the driver's seat. Right now, as the listener, you're in the repair driver's seat, which means it's your job to guide the conversation back towards harmony.
Yeah, you got to put your grown-up pants on for this. Yeah, for this whole listening thing, it's really about. It takes
a lot of work.
Yeah, it's really about getting into your best stealth, right? And pushing that child way far down. All right. Rule number 2. As the listener, this is not the time to trade complaints.
Oh.
Right? Don't hijack the speaker in the middle of their feedback. It's not the time to say, well, what about me? Well, you've got a problem. I've got one too.
Yeah.
For now, it's your turn to be the world's best listener, customer service advocate, just like you're at Costco, right? So a customer comes in and says, hey, this TV no longer works. I want to turn it in. You're supposed to say, okay, I'm really sorry about that. It's great. Instead, sometimes our human nature is like, well, you know what? I got problems too. The Wi-Fi doesn't work.
Yeah, but I came in here to return a TV.
Yeah. But, my life sucks too. Like, let's both just be in the mess together.
Great. Rule number 3, don't get defensive, deflective, or dismissive. A lot of D's there.
Yeah. Sort of deflective when you'd say like the Wi-Fi doesn't work or something.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And don't challenge the speaker. Like, don't say that's not what happened. Don't correct the speaker at this point. I got to come in and set the record straight because that's not how this happened. Right. That's not going to work. That's not going to fly. But that is what our gut reaction is, isn't it?
We always want to, because we don't want to be wrong.
So why is that our gut reaction? Why is that? The truth is that when we dismiss or defend, it's because we're trying to make our own perspective win.
Yep. We're trying to feel better about it.
And we do that because honestly, our inner boundary, which we talked about several weeks ago, but our inner psychological boundary is immature. It's not developed. It's weak. And so when our boundary internally in ourselves is weak, we take everything personally, and then it begins to impact our self-esteem and we start to feel bad about ourselves. So that's why we defend. And when we defend, what we're really saying is, you know what? My ego matters more than our partnership. It matters more than what Robert wants to tell me right now.
Matters more than this conversation.
Our ego is more important than our connection, our relationship. Our ego is more important than the truth of what happened in the first place that caused this rupture. My ego is more important than getting to the bottom of that.
It sounds terrible when you say it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sit with that just for a second, right? It's a very uncomfortable truth that when we're defensive, we're trying to set the record straight. And when we get defensive, it's really just us prioritizing our ego. We just want to be right and we want to feel good about it.
I know that's kind of hard to accept, isn't it?
Yeah. And when we get defensive, we're really just communicating this. Since my ego is so fragile, I can't be trusted with your concerns.
I love that because I think I want to be a trustworthy person.
We all think that we'd want to be trustworthy, especially when it comes to like, I have this concern and I need to mend our relationship. Yet our ego gets in the way. Mm-hmm. It's a huge problem, right?
And we're not being trustworthy with our partner's concerns
or their feelings, right? And
Yeah.
the listening position is so hard. I mean, that's why this is step 3. It's easy to, think about it. It's easy to talk about it. It's really hard to listen to feedback, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of grown up
maturity.
thinking,
Yeah.
right? It takes a tremendous amount of self-regulation.
Yes.
Where you got to be able to just hold down and not fire back. It takes a lot of self-honesty, right? To put our defensiveness aside /ego.
Yes.
Right. And just focus on listening.
Yes.
That's why it's called the listener, not the talker.
So those are some 3 big things not to do.
Those are the not tos. Yeah.
Right. So now let's talk about what you should do to be an effective listener. So we have 4 steps.
Okay.
Step number 1 is listen to understand. And this is the foundation. Okay. So really try to understand your partner's perspective. So even if their story doesn't make total sense to you, can you at least see how they might have pieced their story together in their mind? So when they get to that part of the feedback wheel where they're saying, you know what, this is the story that I'm making up in my head about this. Can you even just pause there and imagine maybe you have to use a little bit of creativity or maybe even a little hallucination, right? How could they have arrived at that story? The goal with listening isn't to necessarily agree with them 100%, but just to try to understand and connect with how they got there and what they're feeling.
Yeah. I mean, this is very similar to what we teach in NLP, right? Perceptual positions.
Yes.
We teach our students to be able to just move around and see things from the other person's perspective. I think that's a huge key when it comes to being a good listener.
Totally.
Right.
So last week you did, we did the feedback wheel. We did the feedback wheel.
We did the loop.
I think right now might be good if you just repeat that back, what we did last week.
Okay. So, much like you, if you have to sort of remember the steps, you've got a printed copy of the feedback wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you watching on the video, it's right here in front of me. So I'm just going to refer to it.
Yeah.
So I can keep my feedback to
a minimum
8 sentences.
So you're going to give me some feedback right now on something that I may have done.
Yeah. So the conversation from last week was, we expected Charlotte home at 6. She came home at 8. She was 2 hours late. I couldn't reach her. She didn't answer the phone, didn't answer texts. The story that I had made up in my head. So this is, as I'm explaining to you, the story I made up in my head was that your friends were more important than anything we had going on at home. And at the same time, we were concerned about you. We felt a little bit worried and we're getting ready to start driving the path to figure out if you were off the road into a ditch somewhere. Because again, we hadn't heard from you. And what I needed in this instance and what I need is I'd like you to apologize, both to Dallin and me. And maybe let's make a commitment to each other that we're going to prioritize that communication. Just call or text if you're being late.
Perfect. 4 steps, right?
Perfect. Yep. 4 steps.
So as he's doing that and using the feedback wheel as the listener, I am just, again, I'm trying to just put on my hat as the listener to really see how it is that he could feel that way or make this up in his head in that way.
Yeah. Or just trying to see things from my perspective, because I think that's really what it is. Like, I think if we just disregard one another's perspectives, then we're always going to get into trouble, because then we're not listening and we're not trying to see how our partner sees things.
So you didn't see is that my listening part is all inside of me. So there was nothing yet in step 1 for me to do, except for just, again, be a good listener. Right. And one thing I do want to point out here as a speaker is that you asked for 2 things just now in that feedback wheel. Mm-hmm. It's important for you to disconnect and detach from any outcome. I may or may not comply with your requests, and I will address that later.
I might not get the things I asked for.
You might not.
The requests might be a little too much.
It might be too much. I might come back with a counteroffer.
Yes.
I think in this case, they were very reasonable, so I probably won't. But I could come back with a counteroffer. So the speaker has to be able to detach. And I think that may be the hardest part for the speaker, is not expecting their request to 100% be agreed upon all the time, because sometimes we do create things that are a little unrealistic.
Well, yeah, I think also as a speaker, you go into this like, I want to bring this thing up and I already know what the solution is, because this is going to make me feel better. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we can't get attached to the outcome. Mm-hmm. The outcome is sharing our frustrations, sharing how we felt, sharing what we need. Yeah. That's the role.
And hopefully
not the outcome is in like, I'm going to do all these things and you're going to wear a tracker on your ankle for the next whichever.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't agree to that one.
Yeah.
I'm glad that wasn't one of your requests.
Yeah. So step 2 that you're going to do next, right, is you're going to just check in to make sure that you've understood everything I said correctly. So up to this point, step 1, I've laid out the scenario. I've used the four steps in the feedback wheel, but you haven't said anything.
Right.
Right. And so once you've listened, don't just assume you have it right. So reflect back to confirm that you understood and that you got it right. And this is called acknowledged receptivity.
Yes. So now in this case, this is where I'm going to do that in just a second. But the thing is, I don't have to repeat back exactly verbatim, word for word, exactly what Robert just said.
Right.
I can just summarize the essence of what he just said in a way that shows that I was paying attention, because he doesn't know unless I give him back some feedback. I could have been completely tuned out, doing a shopping list in my mind, nodding along and smiling and saying, thanks for telling me all these things, but I may not have heard you at all.
Right. Right. And that doesn't make me feel heard.
No. So I'm going to just repeat back. And so the very end of the reflection that I'm going to do, I'm going to say, did I get that right?
Yeah.
That's key. Did I get that right?
Does that make sense to you? Do you feel like I've grasped the overall concept that you're trying to provide? Yeah.
And that way, if I did miss something, then he can clarify for me. However, the caveat with that is that you can correct me if I didn't get it right, but don't be too critical that I got it exactly right.
Right. And don't drag in your next favorite stick at the same time.
Yes.
Like something outside of the conversation and then you pull it in.
Yes. So if I got it close enough, if I got it 70 to 80% right, then he's going to feel heard and he's going to say, great. Yeah, that was it. You got it right.
Okay. So the reason this step is super important, this listening and then reflecting back part, is that when the listener reflects back that they've heard the speaker. Now as a speaker, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel listened to, I feel understood. And honestly, that's half the battle.
Yes.
Right. Most people just want to be heard. And so just by reflecting back, now you're already taking that first step towards reconciliation, right? Because now you're listening, you're actively listening instead of just passive listening, right? And so now that you've heard them, I've likely calmed down a little bit. I'm no longer as frustrated, right? And that's great. But if you skip this step, like, okay, yeah, I heard you. Great. I'll just apologize. I think so we think about if we skipped over that step and we just said, yeah, you're right, I was wrong. And, I'll apologize. You got your apology.
Yeah.
But I don't think I felt heard in that step.
Not sure you really got it.
Right. Which is the difference, I think, between glossing over this step and say, well, I apologize, didn't I? I understand why you're still mad. Well, because I don't feel heard. I don't feel like you understood what bothered me in this situation.
I see this all the time with couples too. Like, I obviously give this as homework for a lot of couples, and they use the feedback wheel at home, and sometimes they'll text me midweek and be like, it didn't work.
Yeah.
I used the feedback wheel and it went off the rails and we got into another really big fight. Well, okay, let's backtrack. Let's see what actually happened.
Right.
And usually I'm sure you can guess what actually happened is they probably skipped a step. They probably skipped this step, and the speaker didn't feel understood or validated or heard. And so they felt dismissed, and then the conversation escalated from there.
I will say the quickest way to determine if you skipped a step is if both of you say fine at the end. Or I apologized. Fine. Okay, fine. And you're done. Like,
somebody missed a
That doesn't sound like anything's done. It just sounds like you both agreed to stop arguing.
So let me practice the reflecting back part.
I love this. Yeah, go ahead.
So you've just delivered the feedback wheel. You told me what you experienced objectively. You told me what you created in your mind and what you made up about it. You told me your feelings about it, and you asked me for two things.
Right.
So I'm now going to reflect back and confirm, did I get that right? So I'm going to say, that's pretty valid. That's understandable. I can see your point here. Like, you were worried. I was home 2 hours late. I can see you totally created this idea in your mind that you didn't matter, and that made you feel scared, and it made you feel frustrated and angry. And what you need from me right now is an apology, and to not do that again.
Yeah. It's so hard for people to do, to own their stuff.
That's why we choose defensiveness instead.
Yeah.
Right. So
So much easier to be defensive than it is to own your stuff.
So all I did right there is I just repeated back, and now Robert feels heard. Now he feels understood, and now I can give a response. Now I can respond to his request. That will be the next step.
Yeah. Step 3 is respond to my request.
So step 3 will be, and this is a big one.
Oh.
Right. So now is when I get to tell Robert yes or no. And if he did make an unreasonable request, like, okay, I need an apology. I need you to not do it again and send better communication next time. And I need you to wear an ankle monitor.
Yes.
Okay. That would be a little different. But, so I do need to respond to him. And I think this is probably the single most important skill that you could probably take away from this episode is this step right here.
Yeah.
This response part right here. And I would take some notes on this because we're going to do some major retooling with you guys right now. And this is useful. So Dr. Terry Real likens the response portion of this to relational jujitsu. And the Gottmans
have another version. Yeah.
They call it
Aikido.
Aikido.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because both are martial arts references. And here's why. If you, as you respond, you're not going to go and meet a blow with another blow. That's not going to work. That's just going to escalate. So instead, in Aikido, it's more about maneuvering and avoiding, right? So you're going to disarm the situation rather than just coming back with a blow. And the key to disarming is accepting influence.
Yeah.
Accepting influence.
The same thing sort of with judo. You're accepting. So in judo, and Aikido, right? You just sort of move with that force and move it around you or through you instead of letting it hit a wall.
Yes. So how do we accept influence?
Well, we start by focusing on what you're willing to do rather than what you won't do. I think so many people hit the don't list right out of the gate. Well, no, that doesn't work for me.
Yes.
Right. When there's so many other things that they could. So like a salesperson, let's talk about just you're negotiating a deal, you're buying a car, which we've all done at some point, right?
Right.
A good salesman is going to talk about all the things they can do, right?
Yes.
So let's do, for instance, I want to buy a car. It's $30,000, right? I have $8,000 for my trade-in. We're just sort of working on this, but like I want the new tires and wheels and I want a warranty. I still want it for the $30,000, right? Like, so I'm agreeing, but I'm trying to throw stuff in on the top, right? Instead of the salesman just say like, oh no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. We actually had a salesman say something like that to us a while ago. We were just like,
probably didn't make the deal either.
I was baffled. Instead, he'll say like, sure, I think that we can do the trade-in and I like the warranty and the wheels. Like, I think we can make all those things happen. I'm just going to have to get 32.5
right
for the deal instead of 30,000. Right. So all the things he could. So it's like, yes. And this one's a little sticky for me to do.
Yeah. See, that's it right there. That is the jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. That's it. In sales, they're going to sell you on the positives and they're not going to lead with those negatives. Yeah.
Leading with a negative is always a bad idea.
And the relationship is going to be the same way. It's the same idea. If your partner asks for something, you're going to sell them on what you're willing to do, but what you're willing to sincerely do. And that's key. That's important.
Yeah.
You got to be sincere. And if he asks for an apology, I'm not going to come back and be like flippant about it and like, oh, sorry. Yeah. Right. I'm going to give him a real apology.
Or the other side in our culture right now is I don't apologize for anything.
Right. Oof. So if there's something you're willing and able to do, then do it.
Yeah. It is such small currency to use the word I'm sorry. It heals so many wounds. Sincerely say that. Like, it doesn't take much from you and it will buy years of happiness.
Yeah. Can you give me the request portion, part 4 of the feedback wheel again? Because I want to respond to you.
Okay. So the request is, I think that you owe Dallin and I an apology. And then I'd like to make some sort of, I don't want to use the word rule, but I want to make some sort of agreement. Yes. That if you're going to be late, you just communicate that text or call or whatever.
Okay.
Just make things easier for everybody. And it would avoid this whole conversation.
Throw in the ankle thing just for fun.
Oh, and I'm going to need you to wear an ankle bracelet, an ankle tracker.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why you'd want one of those. But
okay.
Yeah.
So
that's what a phone is, by the way.
That's totally fair. I'm going to respond back to you.
Okay. Good.
So I just stated back what I heard you say. So now I'm going to say as part of step 3, my response to it, which is, you know what, that's more than fair. I know that I was inconsiderate to not do that. I don't know what came over me. It was just dumb. And I know I made you guys worry. And I do apologize. I am sincerely sorry for making you and Dallin both worry. That was not nice of me. And it is more than reasonable to ask for me to communicate better with you next time.
Yeah.
I will totally do that. I'm going to have to think on this ankle bracelet thing.
The ankle tracker.
I think we're going to have to work on number 3, but I can definitely do number 1 and 2.
Yeah, I love that, right? So even if you can't fully meet the request, make every effort to do the repair, which is exactly what Charlotte did, right?
Yeah.
So step 4. So the ball's back into the speaker's court, even though this is a section on listening, right? Now that the listener has made their repair gesture, right? They've apologized. It's time for the speaker to close the loop and accept the repair.
So here's also another thought.
Okay.
If you got everything that you asked for, it is time to let go of the grievance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time to get over it.
Let's get over it. No rehashing, no circling back. No, oh, I thought of one more thing, right? Remember, when you did the feedback wheel as the speaker, you thought about, it says right here in the instructions, state what you need to feel better and move back into harmony. So you have said what it is that it's going to take and you got it. So let's move on.
Don't get greedy.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not the time to pile other grievances in.
No.
But so maybe what if you didn't get exactly what you wanted? Maybe you only got 80%, right? This is the reality of relationships. We don't always get what we want all the time, right? If the listener sincerely tried to meet your request but can't give everything you need, you may have pushed against maybe one of their boundaries.
Yes.
Like, for example, as we've learned, Charla is not willing to wear an ankle tracker.
Right. Right.
So that might be a boundary issue.
That might have been a little pushing it.
Yeah, it might have just been. In these moments, maybe we should just be willing to say yes and accept it.
Yes. Dare to say yes. If you get 80% of what you were asking for, even are you really going to keep grinding on this? Or are you going to have the courage to say that was sufficient? I think if we've both acted in good faith and we've both made a reasonable gesture to repair this, it's time to move back into harmony.
So before we talk about finishing and closing the loop, I want to just point out something really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, at no point did we hear Charla say, oh, well, I forgot my charging cord and my phone was dead.
Yeah.
There was none of those things came into the situation. Easily could have been the reason that she was unable to contact me. One of the reasons.
Yeah.
Easily could have been, but never at any one point in time did she gather something from outside of the concerns that we had and try to make it different and defend herself. That's part of that defensiveness. Well, it might have been a valid reason. However,
and that's why the antidote for defensiveness, honestly, is just taking responsibility.
Yeah.
I needed to take responsibility. So what if my phone died? Could I not have gone to a payphone? So what if my phone died? Couldn't I borrow a phone?
Yeah.
Is there not something I could have done to take ownership for that? I didn't need to just pile on a bunch of excuses to make myself feel better.
And I think that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we are ready to close the loop.
Yep.
Okay. The final cherry on top, and this is a bonus when you get really good at this, right? So Robert has asked for what it is he wanted. I have given him all that he wanted except for the ankle bracelet. It can come back to Robert now, right? Yeah. And the final cherry on top is that he can say back to me, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Is there anything you need from me?
Yeah.
And that is sort of like a how can I help you help me type of a question.
Yeah.
And it's also a way just to, again, what do you need? Which I think is so reparative as well. So let's just demo that last part. I've given my apology. I've agreed to future communication. You're going to say, thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for this conversation and being an adult. Is there anything you need from me other than a new charging cable for your car that could, help this situation along?
Perfect. And that's it.
Yeah.
So now that is the closing of the loop.
Yeah.
We finished repair and now we're moving back into harmony.
Yeah. And oftentimes what I need from you at that point is a hug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And and now we're definitely back in sync.
Yeah.
We're back in connection.
We'll get right back there. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
How long does that entire process take? Depends on how good you get at it.
Yeah, I mean, those things could happen really fast, and especially if we're talking about the feedback loop for items, it could be in 8 sentences. It could be relatively brief. Just depends on how much time you want to spend being mad about it, I guess.
So I would say that now in our marriage, we can do that whole thing in 20 or 30 minutes, from the beginning speaking to the very end hug. We could do that in 20 to 30 minutes. But had this been 20 years ago plus, that could have been something that lasted
20 or 30 days.
Yeah, you're not wrong,
No,
right?
I
That
know.
could have been days, weeks, even a month. And then you are leaving that loop open, that disharmony loop open for all that time.
You know what that disharmony loop does when it stays open?
What?
It collects crap.
Mm.
It collects more stuff.
Yep.
More stuff. And you were late and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And next thing you know, now you're going to have this really great big argument because you've started to include all the reasons you're mad, and then you're having negative sentiment override, which we talked about. Like
more stories in your head.
More stories in your head about you can't do
Bitterness,
anything right. You
resentment.
don't really love me.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And in some marriages, honestly, the loop never closes.
Yeah.
Over time, there's no repair. One person or both people, they're just not willing to repair anymore because so much has gotten in. Like you said, it lets other things in and they just don't care anymore. They don't want to fix it because it's just gone on open for so long that they just don't have the motivation.
Yeah. And they can't see a way past it because it's become so big, right?
Yeah. So I think for us,
we're pretty good at it.
We've gotten pretty good at it. We've gotten really efficient at the process. If there's a grievance that pops up, we know this stuff. And so we can, we might take a walk around the neighborhood while we are actually doing the feedback wheel. We've done that a few times.
Yeah.
And a typical conversation is like, okay, what are your concerns? Okay. I noticed I made this up in my head. I felt this. I need that. Okay. Well, I agree with part of what you're saying and I can definitely do this, and that. Okay. Well, what do you need?
Yeah.
Well, what do you need? Okay. Well, I can do that too. All right, great. You want to go get some Thai food?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's easy because now, we get used to the story that I made up in my head.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I love.
So anytime we start with that, it's like one of those little keywords for us. If I start to say the story I made in my head, like I've talked to you about, the story I made up in my head is this, and I may encompass the first step with the story I made up in my head. But at that point, it's sort of this intro that I become the speaker. She becomes the listener because now I'm talking about the way I felt about a certain situation and we just start moving through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not perfect.
No.
We still mess up and we still fight like you all do. And, there are times where my 6-year-old is like banging on the door, like, my turn,
Yeah.
And so there are times when it's like, I need a break. My 6-year-old's here. I need to take 20 minutes. I'll be back in 20 minutes. And then we can keep doing the feedback wheel and the whole process that we just explained. And boom, we're out of it in 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, if you're hot, you definitely need to take a break. And we have number of episodes on that, right?
Yeah.
So the difference now is that I wish we would have learned sooner, and we hope that you guys are ahead of the curve on us. We've learned how important repair is into our relationship, and we have learned how to do it quickly because we just don't want to drag it out. We don't want to get stuck in this cycle. We want to get to the good stuff like grabbing Thai food and snuggling on the couch, because honestly, how do you really want to spend your time together? You want to spend the time together mad, or do you want to spend your time doing the things that you want to do, right? You can keep beating that same old issue into the ground, or you can just solve it. We are meant to be happy.
Yeah.
We're meant to have joy in our relationships. And if you choose to take the steps to create happiness, choose to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
Choose to be willing to repair for whatever it takes to make your relationship thrive, and choose to cherish this thing that you're building together.
Love that.
The better you are at repair, the more shallow those cycles between harmony, disharmony, and repair.
Beautiful. I think that's going to wrap up today's episode on repairing these breaks that happen in harmony. We've covered a lot over the last couple episodes, but the truth is that the real magic happens when you actually go implement it. And you practice these steps in your own relationship. Remember, repair is a skill, and it's just like any other skill. It gets easier, but you have to practice it. It won't be natural at first. It's going to feel like you're reading a script, and that's okay.
And you might need to read the script. You might need to be able to consult your feedback wheel.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. I would just to make sure you don't mess it up worse, like just print the paper and start out by reading it. You can even come up with fake scenarios to practice it. But once it becomes muscle memory, it really gets easier and easier and easier.
Yeah, and our challenge is for you to start on something easy, like where I put my socks or how I do something on my shoe or something, right? Because the more you do it, it's easy. It's not the time when you're just learning how to repair to tackle
the biggest thing.
We'll be talking about that in another episode, right? But
I like what you always say. You always say,
"Oh,
you're going to suck."
Yeah, every time you do something new, you're going to suck.
Yeah,
you just know that you're going to suck. You're not going to be good at it. Give each other grace and just keep practicing.
Yes.
Right.
Now, you might be wondering from what Robert just said, like, what about the big ruptures from the past?
Yeah.
Okay. What about something that happened a year ago or 5 years ago? The things that are still stinging even years later. Is there something we can do about that to repair that? And that's a great question. And the answer is yes. And that's exactly what we're going to dive into next week. We're going to talk about repairing regrettable incidents from the past. So be sure to tune in next week to learn how to navigate those moments and bring healing to those old wounds.
Absolutely. So, hey, thanks so much for joining us today. If you found this episode helpful or useful at all, we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star rating and a quick review and a quick comment. It really helps us reach more couples who need it. And, if there's anybody in your sphere of influence who you feel could benefit from today's message or any of our podcasts, please, please, please share it. Remember, be kind to each other this week. Put each other first. It's the small and simple things that make the greatest impact.